Hi everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we have 5 INTPs and I'll let them introduce themselves. So Spacey, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
I am Spacey. I've been studying typology for like 4 to 5 years now. A couple years into that, I found the Talking with Famous People community, so I guess I would say I kind of branched off of that. But I don't really like Eric Strauss that much anymore, to be honest with you. So now I'm on my own. So, I do typing sessions, and occasionally, if the mood strikes me, I upload a video just about theory in general. Try to focus on like things that people may believe about certain things that aren't actually true. I try to address certain misconceptions, I guess, more than anything else. Oh yeah, I'm a 954, 9-wing 1.
Very cool. And Anthony, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Spacey's friend. I met him at also Talking with Famous People, like on Eric's channel. I've also been, into the typology communities for like 4 or 5 years. Got really, really deep into Enneagram as of the last few years as well. And sort of had a falling out with some of the communities, but have been wondering if I should start up my own channel or primarily related to Enneagram or just typology stuff in general. I'm also a 911.
Very cool. Yeah, Spacey told me you're really great at the Enneagram. And Tim, would you like to give us a few words about yourself?
Sure, I'm Tim. I've been into typology for a couple years now, and as far as Enneagram goes, I don't really have a type that I strongly identify with, but most people see me as a 5.
Very cool. And Joel, would you like to tell us a bit about you?
Sure. I'm Joel, and I'm an INTP, obviously, and I've been into typology for, probably since I was about 19, so going on more than 20 years, and but I've just kind of dabbled in it off and on, and probably within the last 5 years have gotten much more deeply into it, into the cognitive functions and other typology systems like the Enneagram, things like that. I'm not as familiar with the Enneagram as I am with Myers-Briggs, but I usually identify as a 5-wing 6, and 5-wing 4, right? Yeah, and social sexual, but that's all I know about that.
Awesome. And Dave, would you like to give us an intro?
Hi, yes, I'm Dave. I'm an INTP like the rest of us. I've been into typology maybe 2.5 years. I'm a 5-wing 4 sexual self-preservation.
That's very interesting. Yeah, good to know, good to know. So it's nice to have all of these INTPs in one spot, and it's a pleasure to know you all. And so my first question for you guys is, how do you spot an INTP in the wild?
You don't.
I mean, they're either in hiding or camouflage, or
Yeah.
But when they start talking, you're probably going to. I guess a clue that's not exclusive to INTPs, but you're going to find someone who makes probably a lot of self-disclaimers concerning the accuracy of what they're about to say in a given set of knowledge, so as to remain internally and logically consistent in their statements and their output. And that's you're going to notice a bit of a taxing quality internally, like within them, when they try to both, just formulate arguments and like organize themselves. I suppose it's a bit vague and not exactly exclusive to INTPs, but I think that's definitely a strong clue.
Yeah, super true about the disclaimers. Yeah. So, Dave, what's your opinion on all of this?
How do I spot an INTP in the wild? I would say they're mostly dry, very into the nuance of something, well, that's correct, but there are other angles to it that you're not considering. Generally socially awkward as we're younger, and maybe even as we're older. Stating the truth of something, compelled to say what is true, even though it upsets the social vibe.
I would say a lot of the time we're like deceptively plain looking, maybe, in the way that we dress or appear. And we're usually by ourselves. So if you see us in the wild, we're probably not in a group of people. So if you're just trying to spot us real quick, that's what I would go by.
I love that. So, Tim, what are your thoughts?
I mean, noticing INTPs is a lot like noticing any type, really. The hallmarks are TI and NE. So if you meet someone that seems to be pretty conceptual in the way that they're oriented to the world and tends to make decisions in a very thinkery way, there's a good chance that they're an INTP.
Yeah, it's a quite cerebral type in the way that they approach themselves, in the way that they approach things and orient themselves in their environments, and it's somewhat non-involved at the same time.
So true. How about you, Joel?
Well, I agree with what everyone else was saying for the most part. If our personality hacker class was any indication, a small sample size, none of us were taking notes. So this is also possibly something, a person who's would rather pay attention and get as much out of the environment than be taking notes, and definitely the thing about being alone, like it's just very easy for me to, like, when I was in visiting another city, to just go off on my own and do my own thing. I don't need to be with a group to feel like I'm able to get the full experience. Not that wouldn't be nice, but it's not necessary.
Can I comment on what Joel said? He's probably right about many, but in terms of how people are different, I took diverse notes, and I hate going to new cities alone.
It's funny.
Exactly.
I'm with Joel on that stuff. I had a thought that simultaneously, in the same way that we don't really feel like taking notes, we don't seem to like taking pictures quite so much as other people either. Any kind of thing like that. We don't need to. It's all in here.
Exactly.
That reminds me, like, Tim doesn't have like family pictures in his places because he just doesn't like take them or something.
Yeah, no, it wasn't so much about family pictures. It's just like a friend of mine who is a ISFJ made that comment upon visiting my place. If you've lived here for how many years and you have no photos whatsoever on the wall. And he actually printed out a bunch of photos from events that we had been to together and gave them to me. And then I realized I actually really like having this. Why didn't I know that? So yeah, that's not something I would think to do for myself, but something that is good.
Yeah, it's like maybe you need people to add the human people element to your life, and it's like nice when you have it, but your natural instinct isn't to like include it. But like when you do, it's like, oh, this feels so nice. I wasn't expecting that. So very cool. And so my next question for you guys is, what are fictional or real life INTPs that you relate to?
To go really cliche, Einstein. And I think of that as a person who's really wrapped up into his work and doesn't care about things like pictures on the walls or what other people consider normal human behavior. The absent-minded professor. He's so wrapped up in his work that the rest of it is, I don't want to say irrelevant, but nowhere near as important.
Yeah, I think that absent-minded professor archetype is pretty standard, middle of the road INTP. Like, I wouldn't say that, all INTPs embody that, but the people who do embody that tend to be INTPs.
I'm honestly really struggling to think of any INTPs, real or fake, that I relate to.
Yeah, I'm kind of and there have been some musicians that I remember seeing and reading their lyrics, and they sort of had a tendency to write songs, or like the actual lyrics they used were very like conceptual and sort of were like imploring the idea that, again, I'm not exactly sure how to articulate it, but like their lyrics just served as abstractions of different things that were almost like modeled through their song, and I wondered if they had been INTPs before, that I had related to. But I too am both reluctant to and struggling to come up with fictional or real life examples of ones that I actually do relate to.
I will say that I'm pretty sure a lot of the musicians that I listen to are probably INTPs, just by happenstance, but I wouldn't know for sure.
Yeah.
That's very cool too. So I was thinking, so Anthony, you know a lot about the Enneagram. So I was wondering, what are the most common types for INTPs? Because I know a lot of 9 and 5 INTPs, and I was wondering what your thoughts on it were.
Right. There's a lot of the most common one that I've seen with actual INTPs, TINE, has been usually some combo of 9 with, and if you know about tri-type, with a 5-6 second as their second fixation or affix, that's the terminology. But yeah, usually that has to be the case, is 9 with the fixation in the head. That's 5.6 second. There are a lot of like most INTPs will tend to readily and easily identify with 5 and then 4, and then after that 9. Even though usually that tends to be a mistype, but that's mostly just due to poor literature on the Enneagram that's actually out there and available. So I would say 9 is by far the most common.
Anthony, if I might ask, I'm curious, because I haven't met too many INTPs that have gone deep into the Enneagram, and I'm curious what about it has been helpful for you, and what do you think it is that a lot of INTPs are missing about the system?
I wouldn't venture as far at all to say that it's been helpful to me, unless it's just helpful for understanding things that I was perhaps self-oblivious to previously, but it hasn't been practically helpful for me whatsoever. But I would say that as far as what INTPs are missing from it, in terms of how they might be interested in it, to me, Enneagram touches on sort of if you were going to take every sort of typology system, or every sort of like typology grouping system, grouping people based on their tendencies, like Enneagram is sort of at a, cognitive functions in MBTI are sort of more apparent. It's more about attentional styles to certain forms of information and processing, whereas Enneagram is more, I guess, deeply psychoanalytical and related to like deep-seated issues that you have. And it gets really quite complex, and has far more like archaic origins in like philosophy and religion than is often obviously apparent with it. So it's like the system sort of never ends. Like there's and as far as what's missing from it, I think it's just the exposure to the literature that's out there, and like you have to like involve yourself in groups and look at like the original Enneagram writers just to get a start, like just to get a sort of head start on it. So it's not necessarily like it's not everybody's first thought to do that, unless they find themselves like encapsulated just by not knowing their type or something.
Cool, thanks.
So my question, like, is for Anthony might be like, So INTPs, I think when INTPs initially go into the Enneagram, they assume that they're a 5, like they read it and then they go like, I'm a 5. So I'm wondering, like, how come that happens? Like, how come INTPs tend to mistype as 5s when they're like actually a 9 or another type?
Oftentimes it's because the descriptions of, and this applies to most typology on the internet, like the descriptions that are, you know, the most Googleable or accessible are often also extremely caricatural. So, you know, if I were to go read it, I wouldn't easily identify with the characterization of 9s as necessarily easygoing and, you know, like having a strongly positive outlook or anything like that. I would definitely identify much more with the reticence and the intellectualization as a defense mechanism that they talk about with 5. But there's so much more nuance to that. Like, it's so not a caricatural system. It's more like you have to find out which aspect of the human experience is most important to you, and then how you like internally heuristically handle that. Like, it's and then just the sort of typical descriptions don't touch on that. So like, I don't blame them for mistyping as 5s at all. Like I did, Spacey did. Yeah. Like, yeah. And it usually takes someone to come in and explain what the types actually are and how they represent and why the mistypes actually happen, like specific to the context, like what the person is misunderstanding, for, you know, for them to be able to step out of the cave.
That's very true. Yeah. I find that like some Enneagram types sound like MBTI descriptions because their character get like what like they're kind of like the stereotypical Enneagram descriptions overlap with some MBTI descriptions. So what happens is like sometimes, you know, like I don't know, like INTJs will always think that they're 5s, or like INTPs will always think that they're 5s, or like, but then they'll figure out their real type when they actually like get into the system. But like, it was a really good point, Anthony. Like I totally agree. Yeah.
Right, and to really figure it out, it takes a while, and you have to get like into the system and into the communities as well. Like, that's where the real information is. So, I mean, it's definitely a time commitment if you're really that concerned with discovering that and knowing. But I mean, yeah, like basically what you said.
Yeah, completely, totally agree. So my next question for you guys is like, what makes you feel energized? What makes you feel alive?
Honestly, probably really pleasurable sensory experiences, and that includes stuff like recreational drugs and food and music, stuff like that.
I love debate. I like talking to somebody who can go tit for tat with me for hours and explore something deeply. I could do that forever.
I totally relate to that. It's like the best. You feel like alive when you're able to have a deep level discussion with someone about things that really matter. You know, that's the thing, is like people are often have like superficial conversations. So to find someone that you can have a deep conversation with, it's special.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Good conversation is hard to beat. I also kind of feel like there's a lot of things that if I'm taking the perspective of looking back on things in my life and what have I enjoyed the most, a lot of things are kind of non-stereotypical INTP. Like, a lot of it is time spent with other people and like shared experiences. So yeah, I mean, it's not always like reading and studying and Googling stuff, but sometimes it is.
They say that the biggest indicator of a quality of life is human interaction for like anyone. It's like quality human interaction, and like what high quality interaction is, it's like having a conversation that like matters to you, or it was like stimulating in some way. And that's hard to come across, but it's like the biggest indicator that prevents like depression or anxiety or whatever neurosis is, like being with people that you like. And it might also, like, to bring it back to type, it could also be the inferior FE. It's like aspirational, and it's like you want it, and it's like to integrate fully, you have to integrate your inferior. So there's that cycle for that.
Yeah, I was going to respond with something like facetiously, like caricatural. I was going to be like physics or something like that. But I would say, I don't know, like what you said related to the inferior. Yeah, it makes me feel alive, feeling loved. And what else? Feeling like I've attained mastery and the capability to engage in the things that actually bring me out into the world, I guess. Like that make me feel generally up to snuff and capable and like competent. So I guess like control and mental mastery, I suppose.
Yeah, I would totally second that. Or as far as like inferior FE, that when you have something that gives you meaning or purpose in life, feeling like you have something like that is the best. Like, I mean, I love there's a degree to which like TI can be satisfied with like investigating things that are super interesting and talking to people who are also interested in those things. But there is nothing like having purpose and meaning, feeling like you were meant for this and love, honestly.
Well, no, that's it right there. Just nailed it. That's what INTPs need.
Mm-hmm.
But, we
The
need
recreation,
a place to belong. You know.
Yeah. The recreational drugs can allow for the illusion of that for short periods of time. Yeah.
But,
Absolutely.
This is so warm and heartfelt. Like, yeah, a place to belong, a place to feel like you offer something, that you contribute something. It goes like to Tony Robbins' human needs. Like the biggest human needs are to contribute and to grow. And when you're feeling loved, you feel like you contribute to someone and you feel like you're growing with them. And so that brings me to the next question. How important is it for you to feel competent in something, or just competent in general?
it's very, very important to me, actually. Like, I have to be able to at least avoid basic errors and not look like an idiot, or else it hurts me real deep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you could say that in the sense that, like, if I'm going to write someone a text or an email, I will spend an inordinate amount of time making sure that it is perfectly what I want to say. The grammar is right. There's no spelling mistakes. I want to look competent. And I mean, that it's not that I doubt that, but I know that it could appear otherwise, and therefore I want to make sure that that's the case.
With me, it's like I can give an example, I suppose. Like in my jobs that I've had, like I'm quite a clumsy person, and it takes like it usually takes me a few times to mess up at something before I like just intuitively understand it, I guess. You know, like just with like little like basic tasks and duties, and for whatever reason, I tend to seem to struggle with that, and like struggle with things like hand-eye coordination and jobs where it's necessary to like, and it makes me feel like any competence that I had thought that I had convinced myself that I had before was just like some sort of like self-illusion. Like it makes me feel horrible. And then, or like that I like the only like I've just spent so much time mastering things that are impractical that it's almost pathetic that like I can't do like basic tasks or something. And also things like just like interactions with people. It's like basic world things, like basically like sort of like what Spacey said, not like just not making basic errors to feel like an idiot. Because when I do that, it triggers this fear that like for me, there's no safety or belonging in the world like that I live in. If that makes sense.
I think for me, it's kind of a paradox because on one hand, I feel like INTPs are particularly good at shooting from the hip. Like our NE gives us this ability to guess well, I guess. And we can make it through difficult situations without a lot of planning. So on one hand, it would seem like appearing competent isn't super important, but on the other hand, like when whatever it is something that's important to you, like it's like who you are on the job or something like that. I feel like TI by its nature, like it knows so much about how much it doesn't know that, and in order for it to make good decisions, it needs to already have all of this knowledge together. So it can become like, I feel like we're prone to imposter syndrome to a certain extent as INTPs. For that reason. So it's kind of both.
Yeah, I remember Spacey mentioning to me like self-doubt is a huge thing that, you know, INTPs deal with. It's something to do with like DI, I think, like JI, like TI and FI just have this pre-chance towards like self-doubt or second guessing, or like the like needing to go over logic, refining it more, and to like it causes an insecurity. So I can see that. Also, we have a new member here too. He's a Twitter, one of my Twitter friends. His name is Warmest Robot, and he's too shy to show his face.
Hey. No,
Hi.
I mean, I'll
Hey.
reveal my
Hey.
identity one day, maybe like tomorrow, maybe 20 years from now. I'll get there. But yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. This is pretty awesome. I know I showed up like a half hour late, but
It's okay in true perceiver fashion. I'm kidding.
yeah, right. Well, after work, of course. It's okay if work was already my excuse. So
Yes, for sure. It's nice to have you here. We're talking about how important it is for INTPs to feel competent. So, what is your relationship with feeling competent?
when I hear that, I think of the Enneagram 5. And I don't know if you guys are familiar. It's just like type 5 is that type that's the investigator. And I feel like INTPs as well as INTJs, both of which are often type 5s, kind of develop in a way that they don't want to be wrong, or they don't want to be vulnerable, and might like feel the most vulnerable if they themselves think that they are incompetent. Does that make sense? I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
Basically,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of, yeah, that's like the fear, basically. It's incompetence. I read something that said INTJs developed to not be vulnerable, which would make sense from a lot of just INTJs and the kinds of things I knew that they went through in terms of just their childhood and everything like that. And then INTPs developed to not be wrong. And personally, I think that was like my entire childhood up through adolescence. I had like philosophy kind of worked out, and then maybe I was 15 and I realized like, oh, I've been completely wrong this entire time. And I think that has a lot to do with the development of both of those types. It's kind of getting through that storm to then be whatever introverted, intuitive thinking kind of tendencies follow.
I think that does happen. You get so attached to your own, like, internalized, systematized logic that if it doesn't actually hold up, like, eventually, you know, the cards, like the house of cards, will crumble, and it's sort of bittersweet when you realize you have to like reconstruct and like rebuild that. It's not like a conscious thing. I think it's just like mechanistic, like with the way that the INTP just moves through about things.
Right.
One of the things that we were talking about a lot in a couple different ways, from imposter syndrome to how we're perceived by other people, it's extroverted feeling inferior. It is this fear of having a reputation of not being competent. I mean, part of it's internal. I don't know how internal it is so much as my impression of how the world is perceiving me. That it's incredibly important that I appear competent. That might be more important than me being competent.
Well, I think that ties into the whole introverted sensing combined with blocked with extroverted feeling, which basically amounts to giving people the right impressions.
Right. That's also, if you guys are curious or wondering, that sounds distinctly related to Enneagram Type 3 specifically, which is also a competency type and primarily feels the need to appear competent to people for the sake of maintaining an image of being valuable or indispensable somehow.
Also, Anthony said something earlier about his process of developing competency, I guess, where he was talking about that thing I strongly relate to, where you basically have to mess something up. It's like I have to make every error before I can start not making any errors. But it really made me think that I don't think I really directly pay attention to anything that I'm doing. And I don't know if you guys can relate to that, but that's part of the reason I mess everything up first, is because I'm really not directly focused on anything. It's all muscle memory and layered impressions of the past on top of each other that I'm really looking at.
It's sort of like driving somewhere and forgetting how you got there because of the routine.
Just like that.
Enneagrammatically, if you want to differentiate between whether you're a 9 or a 5, then you relate to both. If you relate to that, you're probably not a 5. You're probably a 9. Yeah.
Right on. I guess one question I would ask in like this literally just surreal, pretty awesome freaking chat we got going on, like first time I've ever kind of been a part of. I mean, I have INTP friends or whatever, more INTJs, but it's basically, is there any philosophy or perspective or just way of thinking or like those initial principles that are still a part of who you are today and very well may have been formed like as a child, like early on? I don't know, like my INTJ dad, he like I grew up really religious, and I mean grace and mercy were like two really big things with him. And I don't know, with all the dogma and all that, just the Bible and kind of finding my own way, it's like there's some things that I would never want to shape in terms of like who I am, you know?
I think it's interesting. I've seen that the type community in general, but also INTPs in the type community, that's a very common motif of having a religion of some kind and then either leaving that or finding something else. I think that's really typical, and I think that it can even be why we might find ourselves interested in type. Like if you grew up in religion, and there's a lot of things about it like that encourage you to develop yourself, and you see yourself as part of a greater body of people. And I think that Myers-Briggs or any of the other typology systems provide a way to kind of tap into that desire without having to be in a religious institution.
That's really true. Also, there's a really weird background noise, so I would maybe ask everyone to mute their thingy-mabobber, just in case. Yeah, thank you guys, unless you're talking. So thank you for the cooperation. Yes, my TE quota has been met today. Now I'm pooped.
Well, okay, I have a couple things to say about this, I guess. One is that I imagine most INTPs do, they trended towards existentialism in general, probably by the time I was like 10 or so. That I was mostly a nihilist for my life, probably. and now I'm more of an absurdist, I would call it. So that's where I'm at there. And I kind of have that reverse experience of, like, I was raised Catholic for a little while, but I was a natural atheist, obviously, because I question everything and blah, blah, blah. But I had this ESTJ dad who was always like, religious people are stupid. Christians are morons. I don't need a God. I can be a good person without religion. So I'm like, fuck you, Dad. I'm going to be spiritual, you know? So, you know, I'm actually, ironically, I guess, more Christian now than I ever was.
That's awesome. Yeah, with me, it was like, I'm going to be like a Christian existentialist, Dad. I don't have to, like, try to be Christ-like your way. So I would definitely kind of resonate with that, TJ. That's awesome.
My friend Dan calls INTPs the quiet rebels, and I felt like Spacey, you really embodied the quiet rebel when you embraced spirituality because your dad didn't. I feel like nihilism, it tends to be associated with like TI DOMs. Is that true? Do you find yourself to have had a nihilistic phase, like to all of you guys?
Yeah, for me, I definitely had that, I think, because I am one of the INTPs that was religious and then stopped being. So I think there was a bit of a vacuum left after that experience. And also, I think with TI, TI is not a great tool for creating meaning or understanding meaning in a lot of cases, because I think meaningfulness is rooted in emotion or in relationships. So if you lean too hard on your TI, you can come up wanting in that realm. And I think it's really easy to, if you're looking at the world from a very logical view, it's like, well, you know, whatever I do, I die and am forgotten, and all of the people I care about die and will be forgotten, and then the eventual heat death of the universe. And it's very easy to just like not see a reason to, like a TI reason to get up in the morning and to care. So I think that is common, and I think that the way out of that is to stop looking with only your intellect and to look at other avenues for meaning in life.
Yeah, it seems that, right, when you rely too heavily on your TI, especially when you're not, you know, when you're also like, I don't know if like grand stackings are talk about here. When I say that, I mean like the unvalued functions too. So like SE polar, things like that. I think that when you aren't so, and you know, like instinctively engaged to be like interactive in a way that makes impact, when you become overly cerebral, you can compensate for that through TI, NESI, by sort of developing this tendency to over intellectualize or rationalize things in your surroundings down to like the granular, you know, aspects of reality that sort of miss the point, which is to live life, and to try to find meaning in it somewhere. And it seems like INTPs, at least more than most other types that I've seen or witnessed, have a tendency to sort of internalize that process that Tim described. Like, well, I'm just going to die and I'm going to be forgotten in the eventual heat death of the universe, et cetera, et cetera. And then it's like, and that's not necessarily like a comfortably nihilistic thought either, I think. Like, it's not, well, the world is meaningless, so I can do anything. Well, it's like, no, the world is meaningless and I still have to deal with it. Like, and it's problems as they present themselves to me as a being in it. So, like it does seem like INTPs have a tendency to sort of internalize that fear or that way of thought, especially when they're younger.
I was going to say, I feel like no matter what a person's belief system is, if they're an INTP, it's usually based on their TI frameworks. You know, it's like the sort of coding, and everything has sort of like a deductive build to it. So at some point, most of us go through some sort of paradigm shift, and it goes all the way back to a certain point in the code where we realize that we were wrong about a particular thing. Everything after that is destroyed. It's kind of like Antonia Dodge talk. I think she calls TI Shiva the Destroyer. You know, just like it's all gone, and now I need to rebuild the framework. Which it doesn't destroy everything. It destroys it all the way back to that point that was not right. And if you have enough paradigm shifts in your life, you start to question the use of logic for finding all the answers. Because how does this keep happening that I believe this was, you'll still use logic, but I mean, you as kind of like, I think Anthony was mentioning, you know, you start to incorporate that other factor of like meaning and try to find meaning through other ways than just logic, like using it in tandem with other cognitive functions and things like that.
Dude, I was literally just gonna say that's what TI is. It destroys, it deconstructs, it critiques, it finds the faults in things. It doesn't create anything. It's a destroyer, and you know it's a powerful tool, but TI itself is utterly devoid of meaning. There's no meaning here. It's binary true false. To have meaning would ruin the entire process. It wouldn't work. And I think that's probably where the divide between TI and FI really lies.
I wouldn't say that's necessarily the case, mainly because TI doesn't exist independently. Like you can't really define. I don't think that.
I'm describing
really
it in a vacuum, I guess, but it doesn't exist in a vacuum. You're right.
I think TI
Yeah,
like,
but I do agree that I do agree though that it's like the least practically useful function, especially in terms of like finding, you know, or it can in a negative state it can internalize the fact that maybe there's no meaning for them. I think that's still often subjective to the INTP too. Again, like not in a vacuum, just like in terms of the way that I've experienced them and experienced myself. So,
I mean, I guess what I'm saying is you're never going to find meaning using a disinterested calculus, essentially.
Right.
So, real quick, I remember tweeting something. It was like, it's funny when there's INTPs when this type that's coined the logician suddenly forgets that like this logic, quote, air quote, is purely subjective. We lead with this. I think of the thinking functions as like just purely egoic. I've told people that when frustrated with just leading with TI, kind of letting ego sabotage everything. It's just like I'm leading with ego all the time rather than someone who might lead with an intuitive function. I maybe correlate that to soul. I don't know, but I truly see, in terms of objective logic, that's kind of where the NTJs have me personally beat. And like just a favorite quote of Socrates is, "All I know is that I know nothing." And anyone I truly care about and want to kind of bring real intent to them, it's like I find myself bringing up that quote a lot to kind of just get to a transparency like a lot quicker than other people might be used to. And I think INTPs, when they can kind of accept that subjective and that power and realize like, oh, this is literally just my own framework, go from that and realize like I'm not wrong. I think that's why FI is all the way at the bottom, because it's like who the fuck am I to tell you what you should value, right? That's I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so I'm like into way more woo-woo stuff than I used to be, and I don't know if you've heard of the gene keys, but they talk about how logic is meant to help us understand things, like to break things down. but it's not really a good basis for making judgment calls. And to me, that makes a lot of sense, because logic helps me construct a narrative for how I come to my conclusions. The problem is that you sort of like, once you create that narrative, you create this sort of like rut in your mind, and it feels right like that. And you begin to believe that this narrative has to be right. And so then you start making judgment calls off of it. So it's more like using TI for what its purpose is, which is to help us sort of break things down and understand it, but not believing that it's the end all be all to the answers that we're looking for. I mean, that's just the way I take it.
Well, if we're looking at logic in a vacuum, sure, it shouldn't be the only decision point. But if logic isn't the thing making a decision and it's emotion, then that shouldn't be a decision point. Logic should be the final decider, and emotion's a data point within a logical decision being made.
That's where I would personally just disagree, just because it's kind of like Jonathan Haidt in his, he talks about the social intuitionist model, and all these studies that they do where they show that people, and I know it's so easy to be like, well, it's the other people that aren't being logical. But in the studies, they show that most people, they get an intuition first when they experiencing or making a decision, and then they come to a judgment, and then they do post hoc reasoning. Mm-hmm. And it's easy to believe that we're not the ones that do that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is my personal experience in life has been that it's better to modify one's intuitions than try to always have the best logic, because everybody, I don't care if they're white supremacists or flat earthers, they all have their reasons. Reasons are not good enough, because they all think they're very logical. And so it's a trap. It's a trap that I feel any of us could possibly fall into. It's easy to think that they're just not intelligent. But it's a trap that I feel we can all fall in.
Dude, I think you nailed it again, because see, TI is not really that logical, but what it's really good at is post hoc reasoning. We're incredibly good at rationalizing what we do.
Yeah, it's used conditionally.
Yeah.
I think INTPs are renowned for really good at drawing out the inconsistencies, but then not necessarily kind of having that TE to be like, well, like, this is how you do it. It's like, no, like, I knew what was wrong, or just, I knew how to be reductionistic, but somebody else might need to kind of implement the other part that kind of fills that gap wherever the inconsistency was. So with MBTI and typed and philosophy and all, just existentialism, that's, to me, that's what it's all about, finding the inconsistencies within myself. And like, my best friends are the people that can like chew my ass out and tell me how it really is sometimes, and just be real with me.
It's very, very, very interesting. Loving the chat. And also, so the TI vocal pattern, if you guys, so I noticed that some TI users, and this is just a thing the community knows too, is that like they have a low, steady, flat tone. So like it doesn't run across with all people, but like a way to visually type, but this doesn't always work. But like TI users, some of them tend to have like a low, steady, consistent, even tone to their voice. And another thing, so we talked about how TI is post hoc logic. And so the thing is, what happens is, I'm thinking, because Spacey and Anthony were talking about making mistakes at work, and that would make a lot of sense in the frame of, if everything is like post hoc logic, then you'd have to make the mistake first to then be able to rationalize it after. But like and then it made me wonder if like TE, like extroverted thinking, is anticipatory logic. So the reason why TE, it already knows how to do it before even making mistakes. So like TE is able to anticipate like one destination to another destination, and that clear line there. So I wonder if TE has more of a anticipatory element to it, whereas like TI might be more post hoc.
Yeah, I think TE has a more inherent understanding of like causal relationships between things.
I think part of the reason is because TE is always blocked with an introverted perception function.
That as well, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like dealing with something epistemological or something like literally like said to be predicted or had already been experienced before or something like that. So, and then it structures it around that way. So it's already logical in terms of its externalized actions.
Yeah, and on the converse, like TI is blocked with an extroverted perceiving function. So what happens is like extroverted perceiving tends to take things with a fresh pair of eyes, thus not really like looking at the the anticipatory or cause and effect logic, because that's more of an SI and NI. Like people, when a judging function like a TE or FE is with an NI or SI, it causes a type of predicting outcomes and ramifications easily, or like in their area of domain. Whereas like when TI or FI, like a JI function is blocked with a PE, so NE or SE, it causes so I call SE like viewing the physical with fresh eyes, and I call NE viewing the metaphysical with fresh eyes. And what happens is when you have that, the logic comes post hoc, because when you see things with fresh eyes, like you by definition cannot be rationalizing while it's happening. You have to like have had it, and then like you then rationalize it with the TI. So you experience it with like the NE or something, and then you after the fact with the TI, if that makes sense. Or
I would imagine that's also a good like little tool to use as an aid to type yourself. Like if you don't know your MBTI type, like think about which one between those two things that you just described like you experience.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah,
awesome. Anthony, I'm also really curious, so what's the difference between a type 5 INTP and a type 9 INTP? Like what are like the fine distinctions between these? Like, how can you tell?
right. I'm sort of immediately reluctant to put it in the context of INTPs in general, but I would say that if you're a type 9, primarily what's going to be driving you is a need to ultimately have a positive outlook on things, even if you currently don't. Like it's a need to rationalize things. Maybe it does apply to INTPs in this way. It's a need to, it can manifest as a need to rationalize things so that things can become more comfortable to deal with. And it's a way to subconsciously dampen things down, which can include, being extremely intellectual. Like you might find comfort in that. But with type 5 is literally across the opposite. It's like almost directly across the opposite from 9. It's diametrically opposed. It intensifies things by contrast. So they are probably going to be much more prone to struggle with nihilism. They're probably going to be more prone to end up using their ideas as weaponry to stave off that nihilism. And they're probably going to be not as slothful as the 9s, but definitely more withholding, as if they don't want to give up themselves to the world for a fear that that they haven't quite grasped it or understood it yet. And the thing is that with a system like Enneagram, both of those energies, if you want to call them that, both of those motivations can exist within the INTP or just within anybody in general. But it's but the work comes in deciphering which one is leading, and I guess you just have to figure out like what, like where does your attention go, and like what tends to be your Achilles heel, I suppose. Is it like sloth and not doing anything because you're intimidated by how uncomfortable that thing might be to do, which might be more 9, or is it a fear of divulging something that you don't want to?
That is so cool.
Yeah.
I feel very energized having learned about the Enneagram in that amount of depth. So thank you, Anthony.
I know it's quite vague, what I had just described, because that can manifest in so many different frames. Like it has to be vague. Like it's such a the Enneagram is often applied, and people often have to type themselves so conditionally. So it's like you have to understand and have sort of internalized, like even if it's not your type, the mechanisms of the different points to be able to differentiate them. Like it can be hard work.
Yeah, it's a lot of hard work. It took me forever to figure out my actual Enneagram type.
What type are you?
I think I'm a 6, possibly 6. I don't know. So, guys, I'm curious. What is the moment that you were sure you were an INTP? Like, what about the type resonates a lot to you? Like, what gave you that giant aha that was like, this is undeniably me? Or like, what are the moments in your life that you've had that are like that just reinforce to you that type is real, or like that you can see yourself in the type?
I would say I first typed as an ISTP, and reading about TI, one of the first things I read was, you make jokes and make other people feel uncomfortable, was the first time that pattern had ever been given to me. And it explained a lot. And as I read about TI, it just resonated with me so deeply. It was, like how we all feel when we first read about it or hear about it, that we feel seen, that we hadn't felt before. And then when I learned I was an INTP, I resonated a lot with the loops, with the TI-SI loop, about being really closed off to other people's opinions and having trouble being motivated and feeling really stuck. So all those parts together made me feel really solid that I was an INTP. Other stuff too.
Yeah, I would say that from the very first test that I ever took, I was skeptical about any personality system, and then took the MBTI and came out as an INTP. And when I was reading the profile, it just totally resonated. And since that point, like I've read through AJ Drent's books on INTP, and I think, wow, I wish my parents had these books, like this just encapsulates who I am. And I've taken the test several times since then, and it's always INTP, but it's always confirmed. And I totally agree with Dave. It's that you feel seen, that feeling like, wow, how does they put it perfectly. So
yeah, I love AJ Drent. I bought everything that he has sold. He calls actually like NPs the destroyer. So he has like a course on them. He calls them like the seeker, the explorer, the trickster, and the destroyer. So NPs play a certain role. And yeah, the TI and the critiquing, totally like true. And yeah, that's really, really cool, Joel.
Yeah, we're agents of chaos. Deal with it. But
I will tell you guys, my name is literally Joel.
okay.
My name is Joel too, dude. Jehovah is the Lord. That's what my dad named me.
Oh my God.
And,
I used to be a Jehovah's Witness too.
I'm 24. I would guess that like none of you are older than 24. And I don't know, like I know that this whole like kind of display I put together in like a few minutes is like totally absurd. But I do want to thank you guys for having me, because this is pretty awesome. Pretty, yeah.
Wow, we come from the same paradigm, and we blew it up.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't know. I've been an INTP since the beginning, since I first stumbled into this stuff. And I've tested as an INTJ once or twice. I tested as an ISTP once, but like my own research confirmed INTP. Other people's opinions continue to confirm it, so I've never questioned it. I remember when I first discovered that's what I was, I'd recently been diagnosed with some kind of like developmental disorder or something like that, basically Asperger's. And I remember having like the list of INTP traits and the list of Asperger's traits like side by side, and like realizing they look pretty damn similar. So that was kind of my moment, I guess.
I just wanted to comment a bit on that. So I was reading typology books recently, and they talked about how TI users tend to, I don't know why I said this, but like TI users tend to have like that, like Asperger's, or like not all, oh my gosh, but like I was reading and they were talking about they when they're younger they think that they might have a learning disability or something, because the way that TI learns is that it needs to like Spacey said, it needs to make every mistake before it actually knows like the right way, and that some TI users can feel like they are a bit slower when they're younger, but when they grow up, they don't have that. But I don't know. I read that in Building Blocks of Personality Types, so I don't know.
Well, I can see that. Like maybe we go slower so that we don't have to go back and do it again.
I had first, I had first typed as an INTP, and then I don't remember exactly how it happened, but I had like decided that, and then with, you know, the improvement of the opinions of other people, that I was like an ENTP, and then I sort of had fallen into this loop where I couldn't, where I had thought I was an ENTP, and because of my own like my own diffidence and apprehensiveness to my reasoning as to why I was an ENTP was an indication of like a failure to make that reasoning like epistemologically solid. So I had mistaken like my own inability to type myself for inferior SI rather than just like intellectual rigor, because I had noticed other INTPs who had been so certain that they were, and I thought that, you know, perhaps that if I was like actually an INTP, then that would have manifested similarly for me. But then I realized just through my own research that that's not necessarily how it works whatsoever.
No, I've seen like ENTPs, for example, will actually be more certain than INTPs are, but it will change from moment to moment. They'll be certain about different things.
Right.
We just won't make up our minds in the first place.
Yeah.
I think I can definitely have some particularly like exuberant, maybe more ENTP like days, but those are days like I know the choices I've made throughout the day that kind of maybe like reasoning behind like any behavior or things said, and I'm right, I promise. No, but so with INTP, it's a few years back, just everything you read, and then the self-autonomy is basically, that's kind of, when I read that, it was just goes most self-autonomous, and I think, I don't know, I definitely like to think I'm autonomous.
Yeah, so for me, I took an online test as my first exposure to MBTI, and I scored INTP. And in reading the description, it seemed very true. Actually, it hit home in a way, but maybe a little bit different from what other people felt. I was very disappointed, actually, because there were a lot of things in the INTP description that were things that I don't necessarily want to be. The tendency to be completely oblivious to the energy in the room, and to, you know, be the wet blanket sometimes, to be the devil's advocate when that's not appreciated. All of the like inferior FE problems, in reading that, I'm like, man, that hits way too close to home. So for me, that was kind of a moment where I thought, okay, I need to learn more about this, because I don't want to be an INTP. I want to transcend being an INTP.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's it was like sort of an analogous thing that happened to me when I sort of figured it out. It was like when I had to become accosted by my own issues related to my state of being, you know, TINE, was when I just sort of had to resignedly accept it.
Yeah, you should feel roasted by your type description, not like vindicated or, you know, whatever.
You can feel vindicated by it if you just make it, you justify that to yourself. You can just pick out the good things.
You know, you don't want to be like, oh my God, this makes me feel so special and good about myself. No, that's not your type.
Yeah.
Maybe. It depends, though. I mean, what if I say often that I was raised to be an ISFJ, that people told me those are the things I should prioritize. And so obviously that's exactly what I'm not. Like, it's the actual worst thing they could tell me. And so I'm really consciously trying to be really empathetic and understand how people are feeling and arrange what I do around that, and be really appreciative of the past and all these, try to not ever rock the boat, which is exactly what I'm not supposed to be. So in that way, I did feel vindicated. I did feel like I've been doing it wrong this whole time, and that made me feel good. Exactly what Tim said, though, those things are all awful, and they're all true, and they're all totally unconscious, and I hate them, and they're terrible every day. But no, I mean, there's certainly some parts of it that changed who I am and allowed me to find my proper vibration.
Right. Well, I know what you mean about that, though, because sometimes it can be a situation where, like, other people are telling you that you're doing things the wrong way, but that's actually just the way that you were supposed to do things. But it's just not a very common way of doing things.
Exactly.
That's true. You guys are hitting the nail on the head. So my question, Joel, you said that you really resonated with the TI description before. So I was wondering, what specific part of the TI description like hit home?
Let's see. Well, I mean, just the way that it did. There's just a couple of things I think related to it. The way that it describes frameworks, and the way that when I think about my the way I analyze things, that seems to make sense. There's a sort of like, I don't know if you'd call it like a deductive sort of flow to it, but that makes sense. And plus, I mean, when people like in the personality hacker profiler training thing, they try to isolate the cognitive functions, and we go through the exercises, and when they talk about the way, I mean, I hate the term like radical honesty because it's way overused and people don't, but the feeling that there are things that I believe to be true, but I'm afraid maybe to share because it will create disharmony, but I want to so badly. Like, I want to talk about those things. And I don't feel that there should be anything, that it shouldn't be something I can't talk about. Like, it's frustrating to live in a world where people take things so personally. And so all of that about TI really resonated with me. I thought that's definitely how I am.
Yeah, that's really well put, Joel. In the INTJ panel, they called FI radical authenticity, and it's very fitting that like TI is radical honesty. So it's like paralleled, and it's, it sits really nice. And so I was wondering, like, what specific part of the INTP description that you read was so you that it gave you chills? Like, Tim talked about inferior FE, Joel talked about the dominant TI, and I was wondering, like, what part struck so true that it gave you chills down your spine?
There's one part from an INTP description I read that was quite good, but I don't know if most people actually saw that one. And it mentioned this part where it says the TI-NE axis creates a curious, overriding desire to observe from a detached position. And that really resonated with me when I read that. And further down, when it was talking about the lower functions like SI and FE and stuff, it mentioned something about how we often enjoy dissonance in our music. And that also really resonated with me. I like really noisy, harsh music sometimes.
To answer your question, and this is similar to what Joel said, I get angry when people say untrue things around me. It's one of the very few things that makes me angry. And I'm driven to speak what I think is true, even if it upsets the social balance, especially if it upsets the social balance. The idea that somebody would keep the social balance by saying untrue things is absurd.
Are there any examples of something that would be untrue?
All right,
like veganism is healthy, for example. That could be a good one.
I don't want to get too political or like be really weird.
See, the fact that that's even political is ridiculous.
By the way, Spacey, that was such a TI TI statement. So yeah. So basically, the TI test is like, a personality hacker is like, can you come up with an offensive truth? And basically, Spacey just did it like naturally, like just like it took zero energy to say something that would offend like all the vegans in the audience.
You're welcome.
Spacey,
Is
you have
any
to
INTP ever truly offended though? Like, I don't. It's, I think there's some impartiality between the ITPs in particular.
What do you mean?
Basically, so it's that TI. It's kind of just that like tunnel vision, as far as almost just that all the way repressed introverted feeling, to which, as I've gotten older, I've realized, it wouldn't be a bad idea to maybe try to start developing that. And like, it's gotten really weird ever since I've kind of made that, like, brought that much intent to feeling my own feelings rather than thinking my own thoughts, as I had as a child, and just kind of on autopilot. It's always those thoughts. And then, but I don't know, like, I think there's enough of that impartiality there for us to be able to philosophize and kind of reach a transparency to where, like, even if it is political, if you kind of seize your own feeling on something enough, granted, we all kind of understand and accept each other for who we are, rather than like looking to kind of point the finger at someone who might say something wrong, or that, I don't know, but I'm also tired of hearing my own voice, so I'm sorry. I feel like I'm like could I be holding the torch for inferior FE? But
Sure.
I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on impartiality? I guess
That's a good descriptive word for us. Impartial. I don't know. I guess when people say stuff that's false, it only bothers me if I think that it's like a dangerous idea, that if this falsehood is repeated to a whole bunch of people, then things are going to go south, or people's lives are going to become worse. You know, if it's something like, you believe in a God that I don't believe in, you know, whatever. If that makes you happy and it's not hurting anybody, that's cool. I'm not going to correct you. Or, fuck, if you want to eat a plant-based diet, I'm not going to correct you either, honestly. Go for it. Do you. It's like, as long as it's not dangerous, I don't care.
I agree. I would say that's where, I mean, since TI doesn't occur in a vacuum, I feel like there's a degree to which it probably touches on, when something touches an ethic, or when somebody says something that like Spacey's saying, it could be dangerous, that then causes, you know, this the feeling of like, I mean, I would feel upset when someone's just spewing. It's like, I mean, to give an example, my roommate at his job the other day, his boss comes in and starts talking about, he's got an article about how, let's just say, if a certain race were to leave America, the number of diseases and the number of crime, things like that would go down. Something like that is so incredibly offensive, just so like not even close to anything even okay to say. You know, it's like that kind of thing does get me, because it's just amazing that there are people out there that, you know, can do that. So anyway, I'm just saying that it like Spacey said, there's lots of ideas that are, you know, neither here nor there. They might be true, they might not be true, but I may not personally believe they'd be true, but if it's not hurting anybody, you know, who cares? But there are certain things that are definitely potentially dangerous ideas, and when they're clearly not true, it definitely bothers me.
Well, and it's our job to point that shit out as INTPs, really.
It is our job. So talking about impartiality, it's our job to see all the narratives, take them, deconstruct them, and understand them, where they come from, and see which ones, like Joel are talking about, are toxic, and because people believe their own bullshit. And so somebody has to be a referee and say, that's bullshit, that's bullshit, that's bullshit. Most of them are actually bullshit, but some of them aren't, or less bullshit.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Dave. It reminds me of like when Tim said that like he sees things in terms of degrees of belief. So it's like this could be bullshit. This is definitely bullshit, or this is maybe true, or like there's degrees of BS, like degrees of belief that TI has.
You know, we're blessed and cursed with this mind that doesn't really get emotionally attached to a certain narrative. And that's why we're able to do that, or at least as much as that's possible for a human being.
That's kind of where I've been at. That's kind of where I've been at during the whole impartiality discussion. It's like,
right, you know, we're still emotional, you know, sex and fear-driven animals, but you know, we're trying to ignore that part.
So my question for you INTPs is, what are your thoughts on being self-autonomous?
Speaking for myself, I really like being autonomous. I don't like having to rely on anybody. I like to be able to detach and do my own thing whenever I want, but I've found myself woefully dependent on other people for a variety of things. And I don't really know if that's ever really going to change. I think that's kind of inherent in inferior FE. Where we rely on people more than we'd like to believe most of the time, I would say.
I might say it's an aspiration, and we get asymptotically closer to needing no one, or at least we try to, and never actually get there. Yes, it's crazy, super important. The idea that, so I own my own company, and I've done that for several years, but the idea that I'd exist in a hierarchy where somebody would tell me whether or not I'm valuable makes me insane.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I think
personally, as like, for instance, working as a nurse, if you start doing something new, wherever you go, you have to be oriented typically. And people will always teach me their way of doing things. And when I'm with them, I try to the degree possible to do it their way. But it's always my goal to eventually establish my way, like what I find to be works best for me. So there's a degree to which autonomy is extremely attractive and something that I want to do, and I'm probably going to do anyway. I'm going to find my own way. But at the same time, I totally agree. To one degree or another, we all depend on other people, but I'm going to find a way within that to be my own independent self.
I think that there's a I think for INTPs in particular, there is a draw to pretty radical independence, and a lot of that comes from TI being just an introverted judging function, and it kind of going off on its own and deciding for itself certain things. But there's also a way that that desire for independence is a real liability if it's taken too far, because actually, like, the things that do matter in life, like Joyce was saying earlier, are our connections with other people. So that temptation to not depend on anyone can lead to isolating yourself. And that is really the wrong way to go, in my view.
You know, I guess in a slight contrast to kind of what Dave said, though, I think there's a little bit of something going on, probably for a lot of INTPs, where it's more like we may not see the value in ourselves, and we sometimes rely on other people to kind of come up to us and be like, hey, I see that you have value. You know, would you please use your skills or your knowledge or whatever to assist me or something like that. I think that makes us feel pretty good. So in that sense, I think that's part of kind of how, and we rely on people to kind of give us a little bit of a purpose, a little bit of a place, maybe create a good emotional atmosphere for us, that sort of thing.
I do agree with that. I think the opposite of autonomous is being controlled. And so it's about, in the context of being needed, how much are we controlled?
Right.
I think it's control is what we really hate.
Right. That's really it. We don't like to be guilted or like strong-armed, right, or controlled or forced into things.
Yeah, it's just happened to me today. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can be really honest with you all for a minute. So basically why I kind of started this Twitter account a couple years back was So, I mean, I have a personal Twitter and everything, and I had always tweeted from that platform. And then one day, and like I was with this girl who's typed INFJ, who's like a really big part of my life for a long time, and kind of always kind of had her to kind of like guide me along as like, you know, what do you think if I make this anonymous account for the sake of my own writing and being able to write in a way that I don't want to put a name and a face on? And 2 years later, it's like become a really weird wormhole in which like can feel genuinely like inauthentic. And but like I know how much more reach of the 1,100 people versus the only 400 whatever, and like all the hometown people of some Midwest town that like if I was tweeting the kind of content that I do on the platform that I do on just my normal, just me, the people that follow me, those 500 whatever, it's not that community. They would read that and be like, oh, this guy's a weirdo. Whereas that Twitter community, it's like kind of all weirdos. So, and we all kind of, so it really was just for the sake of my writing. But I mean, you guys will be the first to know if and when some identity reveal ever happens, because like it's times like these where I'm like, yeah, you know, it's like, gee, like, but so it's like, I don't know, I feel like if Joyce, say if we took a philosophy class together or something, and I was joining the same group, like it'd just be me and my face and everything. And whereas like, since it was go figure, it's like through this platform that I'm kind of making all these connections with people in ways that I've never had before. So, and that's not something I like just, I mean, my family knows that. They're just like, oh yeah, Joel's got the weird anonymous Twitter account that he always talks about. But aside from that, it's, yeah, I mean, I just want to let you guys know it started kind of really more with writing rather than like hiding, even though I do think there's, yeah, no, I'll leave it at that pretty much.
I see. So like to escape control, it's like to make your own type of platform to where you can be autonomous. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, like something in TI descriptions too is like the hating micromanage, like hating being micromanaged, and it has to do with like not liking control too. I think it also has to do with like being a perceiver too. Perceivers just in general are more resistant to control than judgers, and just like broad sweep, not true, but like if you link it to functions like NE and SE are what perceivers have, like TI and FI. So those 4 functions are in the top 2 functions of all perceivers, and that like NI, SI, FE, TE are the top 2 functions of all judgers. And what this causes is that perceivers tend to have a pre-chance towards being a little more autonomous, and judgers just have a pre-chance of accidentally maybe being a little more controlling.
Well, okay, so Joel said something earlier about how we have to figure out our own way to do things, and it's really annoying when someone keeps coming up to you and being like, hey, just do it like this, just do it like this, just do it. No, we have to figure out at least a process first before we can even begin to listen to you. Sorry, it's just this hang up in our brains. But like, I've had so many.
When that happens,
What's up?
Well, when that happens enough times, you start to get the sense that it's just not worth even attempting to explain, your logic to other people. And then I think that's where you can then start to end up in anonymous Twitter communities where, I really think that's what happens.
Yes, I think you're right.
I think that one aspect that it leads to that is how TI actually tends to like pre-compute or like do most of its thinking before the event where you actually need to use that thinking. So I find that I'm very resistant to things like following a checklist where all of the steps are already written out and you don't even need to understand how it works if you just follow the steps. But I'm very uncomfortable with that. Instead, I feel like I need to understand how everything works together, and then I don't need a checklist. Then I know exactly what I can do in any situation to get the outcome that I need. So yeah, I think that a lot of people don't understand that about INTPs, and we can, in certain situations, seem like we have no idea what we're doing, and we don't. But give us a minute, and we'll know more about how to do things than a lot of people. So,
well, it's like so my TE foreman on a job site, like I'm that kid who thinks he always knows better. Is essentially what it comes down to, because I got to do things my way, and I don't just do things the right way. It's a big issue.
Yeah, it's like it kind of has to make sense to you in order to accept it at all into your mind, maybe. I had this TI user I used to work with, and there was this really useless machine like to clean the dishes, and he's like, it makes no sense to use this. But then like our TE managers like, just use it. And then he's like, but why? He's like, and then he spent like the whole time questioning it, and I'm like, so it's like what I think it demonstrates is like that questioning nature of TI. It's like, well, I need to question this before I can let it into my brain. And it can annoy authority figures because they're like, I just want you to follow ABC, and it's tough because it's not always wanted to be that way. Also, Tim mentioned a really interesting point. Okay, so he talked about how TI doing logic beforehand, and it's interesting. So Joel mentions like the post hoc logic, and I think they're both true. So I think a TI, what it doesn't do is in the moment logic. So I think what TE is, well, it does do that. Everyone does all forms of logic, but as an introverted function, introverted functions tend to post-process. So what happens is that they either do a majority before the situation or after the situation. But it's the thing is like TE is more in the moment as it's happening, just picking a direction as the situation is unfolding. And what this causes is like, because TE, like, okay, I know this is very convoluted. I'm having a really hard time explaining it, but it's like TI tends to, okay, you know what? It's okay. But yeah, good point, Tim.
Well, I think I know where you're going with that, and I think that it's the way that TI post-processes and also like the pre-processing, what it is TI has frameworks that it's constantly constructing. So when you're post-processing, you're constructing your framework. And then when you come to a moment in your life where you have to make a decision, because you already have the framework built, you don't actually have to do a lot of thinking in that moment, because it's really clear to see in your framework what's true and what isn't. Whereas I think that with TE, the thinking is being done as they're making the decision, rather than TI, where the thinking and the decision making are kind of separated.
Yeah, I feel like there's a degree to which TI is known for being pretty good with language, with words, and all languages are built on some kind of framework. And if you just drop me off in another country where I don't speak the language, I'm not going to be able to function very well. But if you give me time, I will break that framework down and I will understand it. So if I don't seem prepared, if I don't seem ready, it's because I didn't have a framework prepared ahead of time. And so anything, I agree with what you're saying. Essentially, I have to experience it and then realize I wasn't ready. And then I'll go back and I will work on building a framework where now I'm comfortable because I understand what's going on. But it doesn't really happen as well in the moment.
Basically, TI, and I guess the TIFE axis in general is like cross-contextual, whereas TE and the FI attached to it is assessing situations only based on the current context. Which is why TE is really responsive to what it's immediately observing in the environment and how it can best handle with the current situation at hand to achieve what its current goal is.
I tend to think like if you're familiar with that with CEST theory, CEST, the cognitive experiential, what is it? Cognitive experiential self theory, something like that. But it breaks it down. It's kind of like a left brain, right brain kind of thing. And there's the experiential side, and it very much seems sometimes that people with TEFI, like it's like this attitude of like, I'll know it when I see it. Like they have to experience, and then they'll say, this is right. You know, this is up to snuff, or this is what I like. And it sometimes seems like people with TIFE, it needs to make sense with their framework before they can accept it. So it's sort of more cognitive rather than experiential. I don't know.
What about the word universal? Like Tim, I talked to Tim before about like calling TIFE, like he called it universal. So yeah.
I was about to say something right along those lines, actually. We're looking for things that are like true in all cases, regardless. That way, when the time comes, like we don't even have to really think about it, really.
Right. I had like I had this idea of like, this is like an awkward analogy, but if you were going to take like translucent circles that are tinted with different colors and then sort of overlap them into a Venn diagram and look in the middle, and then find like sort of that common wavelength that they're all like what commonality that they all share, and that's like the lowest common denominator sort of principle is like what TI is looking for. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. An organizing principle.
Right.
Yeah. Uh-huh. I've heard it said before, like it's like finding something and then categorizing it until you cannot, like it's so precise that it needs no more categorization. So you hit that universal organizational property there, and then that axiom that can, like it's kind of like Antonia Dodge calls it like clean slicing logic until you get to the finest point, in that it cannot be reduced anymore. So you keep deducing until it's in the area that it's irreducible, that you've gotten to that universal property.
I think that's one thing that actually annoys me, at least as an INTP, is when people give me like too many details, because it's like all we really need is the organizing principle or the gist of something to begin with, right? And then we can fill in all the stuff that's inherent or implied from that. And then if we have any further questions, we can ask you. I think sometimes people with like SI high up in the stack will just start unpacking all this stuff that means nothing to us yet. It's like, yeah. It's like, where are you going?
So I agree with the details thing. I think that I found that the way that I learn things best is actually backwards from the way a lot of people do. A lot of people want like the most foundational thing and then build on top of that and build on top of that. And then like way later, you actually learn it at the level where it's applicable to life. But for me, I can't do that because I ask the question why for everything. Like, why is this important to know? What is the like the thing that's important about this? So it's helpful for me to actually start kind of at the higher level, so I understand why, and then get more detailed and let the knowledge, the detailed knowledge, come after the bigger picture knowledge, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we're always asking the probably all of us kind of ask the why, because it's like, what is this for? It's like when Spacey was mentioning earlier about the rules and doing it the quote unquote right way. People often, their excuse for why it's right is because it's maybe in a rule book or it's what they were taught specifically, and that means nothing to me. What matters to me is what we're doing this for. Like, what was the essence? Why are we doing this? And that leads me to my way of doing it, is figuring out what is the shortest path to accomplishing the reason, the purpose that we are doing this for in the first place.
What's optimal?
Okay, absolutely. Very, very fascinating discussion, guys. So we're nearing the end of the chat. So I was wondering, do you guys have any closing thoughts, any questions you'd like to ask a group of INTPs before it's all over? Spacey, you're muted.
Sorry, I keep forgetting. Okay. My only closing thought is that I accidentally left my iced tea in the freezer, and it's probably frozen now when I just wanted it to be cold.
That's the best closing thought ever. Oh no.
It could be worse. You could be like me and like leave your car keys in the freezer.
But nothing happens to them in the freezer.
You can't find them.
INTPs are great. That is actually the most adorable thing ever. So, any other closing thoughts, guys?
Well, I'm just like pointing. I'm just like
If I'm
sort
never
of
reinvited back, I'll be here to listen. All right.
I'm just like counting all of the awkward silences and praying that you don't edit them out, so that they get to stay in the live stream.
Okay, so Joyce, how about this? In an email you sent me with some questions and stuff, there's something again about INTPs being robotic or something. Yeah, maybe when I was a kid, I was pretty robotic and monotonous or whatever, but like nowadays, I'm sorry, but like y'all are the robots. I'm like the least robotic. Sorry, I'm blowing that wide open.
Yeah, so
I apologize. I haven't integrated as much as you have.
Yeah.
Spacey.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's a tendency to feel when you're young, when you're not able to sort of like, if everyone else around you is being emotional and you're not able to conjure that up, to feel like you're out of place, that you're a robot. But as you grow older and you get to really understand yourself and where your emotions are, they're still there. They may not be externally visible to other people. You embrace that side of yourself. It's actually I've kind of seen it as a special thing that people can come to me with their emotional problems, and I'm like, oh, well, I can take it in and not get like visibly emotional about it, but care and have concern and help in the way that's possible. So it's really kind of a gift that when you're younger, if you're around a lot of just types that are expecting certain things from you, certain social contracts to be fulfilled, that you may feel like you're a robot, but that's it's really not completely true, or true at all, really, for that matter. It's just like getting to appreciate what is different about our type.
I don't think I ever resonated with feeling like a robot. I feel like some of you guys are talking about feeling like a robot when you were younger, and believe me, it looked really weird, but was so busy trying to be liked that I tried to force myself to be social in weird ways. And I'm actually, as weird as this may seem, I'm trying to be more robotic now, but in a calibrated way, in a way that my emotions are exactly what I intend and not for a show. That's the way I express myself. It's not robotic, but it's intentional.
We all have our reasons, Spacey.
Oh, I know what you mean about that, though, Dave. It's like sometimes, at least when you're younger, at least, it can feel like you have a lot of pressured speech or something, or like you feel pressured to express yourself in certain ways for some reason, because that's what people expect or something like that. But it comes out completely weird and unnatural. So like,
yeah,
totally. Okay. Yeah, that's fascinating. Thank you for addressing that INTP stereotype. Yeah, well, at least, Spacey, you have an ST popsicle in your refrigerator after this. So, yeah. Any other closing thoughts, guys? Anything you'd like to ask the INTP crew?
I don't think so.
Cool. Okay.
Come to my 40th birthday party.
Us? All of us? Or just the INTPs?
All of you.
Yeah.
Why would I exclude you, Joyce?
Because I'm not an INTP. I'm not as cool as you guys.
Yeah, well, I'm an INTP, and I don't think that way.
I don't want to come.
Oh, snap. Drama.
Fine. Get out of here.
That's it?
Wait, how many years is it going to be until your 40th birthday?
12.
12. Nice.
Make sure you got a big enough calendar.
I'm not J enough for that. But yeah, Awesome. If I will, I'll keep you to your word. And when you're 40, you better invite us, or I'll feel betrayed. But thank you guys. Thank you guys for being such a wonderful group of INTPs. You guys and your radical honesty, you really make the world a more intellectually honest place. And like you guys brought in the intellectual categories of other people. When a thought is harmful, you guys correct it and you destroy it, you know? So that's awesome. Like, destroy all the bad thoughts in the world. Like, you go, you guys. Like, you're doing a service to everyone. And I'm just happy that I got to talk to you guys. It was like a pure joy. And Spacey has his own YouTube channel too that I'll link below. His typing services are really cheap, so you should really snag it. Like, it's awesome. And Spacey is a cool, chill dude. I also have a typing service, but it's more expensive than Spacey's. So you guys can also check that below. It's like $70 to $100. And yeah, I believe Dave has a podcast too.
I do. I am reworking it at this moment. It'll be called The Forest and the Trees, with estimated release date of August 1st. Will be the new one.
Excellent. Look out for that, guys. And yeah, thank you, Joel and Tim, for being my classmates at Personality Hacker. You guys bring me that INTP goodness. I always feel like you guys have really interesting thoughts. When I listen to you guys talk, I'm like, wow, these guys have really interesting ideas. And yeah, and you guys have quick wit, and I always appreciate people with quick wit. And thank you, Anthony, for bringing your Enneagram expert to the field. You really taught us the differences between Enneagram 5s and 9s, and you really enlightened me with that system. So thank you. You really taught me a lot about it. I'm so grateful. So yeah, y'all INTPs, you're just so smart, competent, you know, autonomous. Thank you for existing. Thank you for being you. And yeah, I'm just glad. And thank you, audience members, for watching all these long videos. You the best. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next episode, and bye, y'all. Bye.
Bye.